If you have not already put yourself on mute, please do so. If you receive a call, please hang up. And if you're calling in, please do not put us on mute. Don't put us on hold because we do not want to hear the background music. Put us on mute if you need to talk to anyone. And also, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box or raise your hand so I can go ahead and take those questions. So we'll go ahead and get started this morning. What I would do now is turn the conversation over to Dr. Sharita Golston, who's going to introduce our presenters, a panel of presenters, excuse me. And then we're going to have Ms. Sabrina Terry, who is going to then facilitate the discussion. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, ma'am, loud and clear.
We have with us today on our esteemed panel, we have Toby Roan. He's the Senior Director of Marketing at Wake Tech Community College. We have Suzanne Petruis. She's the VP for Enrollment and Marketing at Presbyterian College in Clinton, South Carolina. We have Jane Power, who's the Senior Director of Marketing at Pitt Community College. We have Dr. Jim Black, who's the President of SEM Works in Greensboro, North Carolina. Monique Canada is with us. She's the Senior Manager of Portfolio Marketing with Capella University. And our facilitator for today is Sabrina Terry. She's the Dean of Students at Surrey Community College. Welcome.
Good morning. So thank you very much for introducing the panelists. My first question for the panelists, and let's see. We will just start with Jane. Can you tell us a little bit about more about yourself and your role at your institution or your company about marketing and enrollment?
Yes. Again, I'm Jane Power, Marketing Director at Pitt Community College, located in Greenville/Winterville, North Carolina. I've been at the college for 19 years. I came to the college from advertising and graphic design company. And when I was looking for a job at the time, education was not on my radar, but I was very fortunate to have found this position, and to me, it has been a good fit for my skill set and my interest. At the college, I have 2 full-time employees, marketing specialists, and 1 part-time employee. The way that our marketing works, we have someone that handles mainly the college side of the house and someone who handles the continuing education side. And in fact, this past year, we have merged our continuing education programs into our curriculum programs. So our divisions now have Con Ed programs incorporated into them. So that has been a challenge, making sure that that's communicated effectively, making sure that everybody on campus understands that change, and how do we move forward with that, communicating to the general public that we haven't done away with our continuing education programs, we've just done away with our continuing education division per se. So that's been an interesting transition over the past year. But I look forward to this, this presentation today, and hope I can learn something and have some takeaways as well.
Great, thank you so much. Dr. Black, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your experience with marketing and enrollment?
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here with you today. I run a consulting firm that's worked with somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 colleges and universities. About 200 of those have been community colleges or technical colleges. Work with about roughly 20% of the community colleges in North Carolina. So been exposed to a lot of enrollment and marketing practices through that. However, before that, before I became a consultant, I was associate provost at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro for 9 years. And before that, dean of enrollment at Winthrop University in South Carolina. And before that, I had a couple of different enrollment marketing positions at 2 private institutions in the Carolina. So I've seen it from a lot of different perspectives, and I hope to bring some of that to you today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Dr. Petrush?
Good morning, and I have not yet finished that degree, but I'm getting closer every day. So thank you, but Suzanne is fine. It's a pleasure to be with all of you this morning. And I was reflecting back on the early days in my career in admission and thinking about the pathways that I had in front of me. And I realized that enrollment marketing and communication would be my preferred direction. And so I set on a course of being able to work in that area of an enrollment management division at a large private institution. And dating myself a bit with this, I will tell you that for 25 years, I've overseen enrollment marketing. The first 8 were under an amazing mentor, and I'm very grateful for that opportunity. And as I advanced in this and worked across several different institutions, people would ask, what's your dream role? And I would say vice president for enrollment and marketing. And so for the past 4.5 years at Presbyterian College, I've had the opportunity to serve in that capacity. I have a central office of marketing and communications, and then I have a 2-person team focusing on enrollment marketing. I love that this gives an opportunity to further connect with all aspects of our campus community. We cannot do this in a vacuum by any means. And you might be wondering, why is this person from private higher education with us today? But I would contend that strategies that we've had to employ in the private arena for many years, as we've had to fight for students, build our pools, attract students to the institution, and keep them at the institution, really have come into play in a very competitive public school environment, whether at the 2-year or 4-year level. So I was delighted to be asked to be part of this conversation today, and I look forward to hearing from the others. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Canada. Good morning. I'm sorry, we cannot hear you.
About that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, my name is Monique Canada. I'm joining you from Capella University. I work on the portfolio marketing team, so my main focus is getting out awareness and increasing enrollment for our priority programs for the university. I've been with the university for 3 years, and we are based out of Minneapolis.
Wonderful, thank you. And Mr. Roan.
Hey there, I'm Toby Roan. I am the Senior Director of Marketing at Wake Tech. I've been here for a little over 2 years. I have spent 25 years as a copywriter and creative director at ad agencies and as a freelance consultant. I'd done a little bit of higher education work here and there. You know, you can't be around the triangle and not in marketing and not work for a college at some point. So it was just an avenue that I wanted to look at. It's this sounds like I'm being flip or silly, but it's great to work to push a product that actually helps people versus just selling hamburgers or bank accounts or things like tires or whatever. So it's really nice knowing that you're working to help people find something that will actually make a difference in their lives. We have a department of about 6 creative people, designers and video staff, and a couple of people who do our social media stuff. It's it's just an interesting way of looking at taking what I've learned over the years out there in the doing all kinds of things and applying it here. There's certain things you can do, certain things you can't do, which is kind of interesting to sort those out, and things that I've taken for granted over the years that community colleges don't seem to do. And so it's been nice to sort of try to apply some of those. So that's it, short and sweet. I'm really happy to be here, so thank you.
Okay.
We're happy that all of you are here. And Dr. Hickman?
Yes, thank you all for being here. Before we go to the next question, I just want to set the stage a little bit, which I should have done in the first place. This session is around marketing as it relates to strategic enrollment management. And so you see so many of our presenters several are not from the community college system. And that's because the committee felt that we needed a different perspective, and not just that of those from community colleges. As we have always said a lot of times, proprietary schools have done a great job marketing to their base, marketing the students who are going to attend proprietary schools. And so have private colleges. And so we wanted to make sure that we brought you a wealth of knowledge, not just from the community college perspective, but also outside of the community college. Thank you, Ms. Terry.
Okay, panelists, we will go ahead and get started with our first official question. Number one, what marketing challenges have you seen colleges face during the past year with COVID, economic crisis, and the social unrest? And I'm just going to mix it up a little bit to keep things interesting. We will start with Ms. Canada.
I think, COVID has really just compounded a lot of issues that the universities and colleges have already had. And so things like being able to easily reach your audience digitally may not have always been the main focus, but with COVID and being limited to not having as much representation on campus, or some campuses still being closed, it becomes more of a channel that needs to be addressed. I would say also just the whole fact around campuses being closed, it helps to have that personal touch when you're talking to someone about their future and their lives, and what kinds of opportunities there are. So that's a challenge that, from a marketing perspective, building those relationships that we found, just the increased level of uncertainty, being able to, for our prospective students, having a level of predictability around their schedule so they know now is a good time to pursue an education. And in some cases, funding is an issue. I know some students will pay for their education out of pocket, but they've been impacted by COVID for their jobs. So that might not be, they might not have the same ability to make that investment as they had in the past. So trying to find ways around that for them as well. And lastly, from an uncertainty perspective, just scheduling, like being, for our prospective students, knowing that they have the support that they need at home to be able to take on this endeavor of going to college and pursuing their education in a different way. Not necessarily having that poses a challenge for us as marketers, because it makes it harder for us to persuade them that now is a good time to pursue that.
Absolutely, yes. And let's see, Dr. Black.
Yeah, I'm just going to pick up on what was just said. I think we're in a period where students and their families, their lives have been upended, right? So making choices about higher education have become much more complex than they were a year ago. So the challenge on the marketing front is, how much should you market? When should you market? And what should you market? So does the typical traditional messaging that has been used still work? Or do you have to shift messaging more towards things like safety, affordability, but not affordability alone, affordability in the sense that it comes with value? And I think that's one of the areas where community colleges in general have fallen down. take that sort of affordability mantra and run with it without attaching it to what do you get for that? Because at the end of the day, that's what families are looking for and students are looking for, right? They're looking for a return on investment. So I think you've got to make a strong case around return on investment in sort of times of crisis to give them a compelling reason to want to pursue post-secondary education. We saw following the last recession, a resurgence in enrollment in community colleges. That was great. That hasn't happened so far here. In fact, the opposite has happened, right? If you look at the National Student Clearinghouse data as of near the end of September 24th, community colleges around the country as a whole are down 9.4%, right? So why is that? Why didn't we see that resurgence of people who are concerned about a bad economy, concerned about jobs or loss of jobs, coming back to pursue post-secondary education at community colleges? Those are some of the things we have to grapple with. And maybe that has to do with the fact there's usually a lag time between a crisis like we're experiencing, or multiple crises as we have here, and the time that people take action. That was the case in the Great Recession, where there was about an 18-month lag time before community college enrollments really started to peak. All right, and we may see something similar here. But what does that say to marketers now? How do you position yourselves for those opportunities that are on the horizon, or hopefully will be on the horizon in the near future? So I think a lot of it has to do with messaging. Some schools are, because their budgets are being cut or personnel are being cut, they're cutting their marketing budget. To me, that's exactly the wrong thing to do in these kind of times. These are the times where you want to ratchet up marketing, not cut it back. And that is not the natural instinct of some college leaders. They look at things to be cut across the board and don't see holding harmless the marketing department. So this is exactly the time where we need to invest in marketing, but the right kind of marketing done through, as Monique was saying, through the best channels possible.
Great, thank you so much. All right, Toby.
Well, I can maybe add a little bit to some of that. That's a lot of that is what we saw and had to think our way through. We saw our audience actually, of course, at Wake Tech, everybody in Wake County is part of our audience, but we saw a little bit of a shift in that there were more adults out there looking for what their next thing was going to be, go back to school or go get another job or whatever that was. So our audience shifted a little bit, and not only did it shift in that way, everybody's needs changed, and that's some of the stuff we've already heard. There were problems about where was our money coming from, feeding your family and keeping a roof over your head and all those kind of concerns, and we had those here. I mean, our teams, our lives were disrupted as well. So there was a whole lot of uncertainty there. We were trying to sort out how to deal with them while we were trying to deal with things ourselves. How to work from home, how to lug all this computer equipment home. But one of the things I thought was interesting was that at the same time you're working with all these messaging issues, there was the nuts and bolts things of the marketing vehicles that we always counted on, that we used to reach both our current students and the prospects out there. Those tactics simply weren't available anymore. We reach our students here through the monitors in the hallways, and well, nobody will see those. We print up little palm cards with URLs on them for things and hand them out at events and whatever. Where are we going to hand them out at? There's nobody around to hand them to. We geofence high schools for digital ads. Well, nobody's at the high school. So there was, in addition to the messaging issue, there was a very nuts and bolts, idea of, well, what do we do now? How do we reach these folks? And that was, I found that fascinating and a lot of fun to think our way through it. But it made us question everything. can we do this? Should we do this? We don't have, and our budget got cut. So, we don't have any money to spend on this, that, and the other thing. So what can we do? It makes you get creative. So that was kind of energizing.
Thank you. Suzanne?
I appreciate all of the comments that have been made, and I'll pick up on this idea Dr. Black mentioned of shifting messaging. When I think about COVID, the economic situation, and social unrest, each one of those things has had a role to play in shifting the time and attention of our team members to writing different ways, to thinking of messages that would address various concerns that have come up. So with COVID, health and safety perceptions, students and family members wondering, is it safe to be on campus? What sort of care is being taken? What are the preventative measures to prevent a spread of the illness? But it's not just the prospective students and current students and their families. Even our other groups, faculty and staff, wondering what is it going to mean for them to return to the physical workplace? How are schools dealing with upticks in the number of students and others presenting positive test results? Whether you call it an outbreak or an increase, we had to deal with our own situation here on campus. We're in a highly residential environment, and the number of students who were presenting as positive reached a certain threshold. So we took a step back and said all classes are going to be conducted online for 2 weeks. We're now back to the single digits, and as of today have 5 active cases of COVID among our students. How does that alter opportunities to show campus? And when we might think about messaging and collateral, and that will probably take up a large part of our conversation today, what's the product itself? So for an institution that traditionally has not been online, what's our real and perceived ability to develop and deliver quality online educational and student activity type programming when that is not at all the realm in which we've operated for many years? The pieces on economics that have been mentioned, institutional constraints and budget cuts. Now, I will say that every member of our cabinet was asked to bring forward ideas as to where we could be conservative with the budget. Marketing was not exempt from that, but I tried to look for areas of least harm. So we had ramped up to produce 3 print versions of a magazine each year. We're looking at delivering only 1 print version, or perhaps going to no print versions during this time, but we'll still produce the magazine and make sure that we have that digital distribution available. So where might you feel the least impact with a cut that you're being asked to make? Certainly the students and families questioning affordability and value, employer paid programs perhaps being cut. And then what about on the far end of the degree? What's happening with their ability to find employment successfully, and how does that feed back into your messaging? And I'd say one of the most challenging areas has been social unrest, understanding the depth of harm and despair in many communities and the way that has individual impact on our constituent groups who are part of the fabric of our institutions. How does all of this play out in social media? What happens when you have Black at name the institution as an Instagram site? You're not in control of the message, but it's a way for the people who are part of your institution or who have been part of their institutions to express their concern and what has happened to them. So how does the institution in turn react to that appropriately from a marketing standpoint, but more importantly, what are the real actions being taken in institutions, from task force being created to statements and training, etc. And then how do you take those activities and turn them into material that you need to share with your various audience groups? So it has been an extremely interesting 6+ months, and I'm sure that that's only going to be amplified in the coming months.
Yes, I was sitting here as the dean of students at an institution thinking Suzanne is singing to my song. She is she's making a lot of sense with everything that she's saying, and very relatable. So thank you very much for that. Okay.
Sabrina?
Yes.
May I add one thing?
Sure.
And this gets back to message direction, right? So in times like we're in, like right now, with tons of uncertainty, I think there's two key approaches that you have to take. One is making things more certain, right? So I was working with a small number of community colleges during this pandemic, and what I saw in every single case was very slow response time to making decisions about what are we going to do in the summer, what are we going to do in the fall, and then even slower response times to conveying that out to the students and other constituents. That creates a void where uncertainty just breeds and creates doubt, right? And that costs you enrollments. The other thing I think people need to hear from you is a message of hope, right? How is my future going to be better? And how can you help me achieve that? How can you help me get there? That tends to be a message that community colleges convey pretty well already. But I would just put a stronger emphasis on that, telling stories. You've got so many great stories of students who've come and been successful with you, and it's changed their lives. So I would really focus on that side of things, and not so much on the things that are more mundane and more typical.
Great. That's great advice. Thank you. I think it's easy for us to focus on the negative during these times, but being able to take something that is uncertain and being able to make that something that can be positive for these students is important. Jane.
Okay. A lot of my thoughts have already been shared, so I will agree with a lot of the information that has already been shared. With our particular situation, people were very scared early on, scared of COVID, scared of unrest, and just so much uncertainty. And I think our campus has done a great job of making people feel safe when they're on campus, as far as limited entrance and exits, and hand sanitizing stations, and mask wearing if you're outside your own office, or if you share an office, you are required to wear the mask when you're there. We do have some classes still face-to-face, some of our health science classes, our construction and industrial technology classes where they're training. So those are still face-to-face, but for the most part, everything else is online. We did make decisions fairly quickly. So I feel like we were in a good place of not delaying our decision-making processes for our plans, and making the decision early on for what was going to happen this fall and what will happen in the spring. I loved Jim's comment about stories, and the idea of telling stories in the middle of all of this. Unfortunately, we lost our videographer in the middle of this pandemic. She moved on, had already planned to leave, so we didn't have that person to be able to do that type of work. So that limited us a little bit. Like everybody else, we thought we would see an increase in the community college attendance from parents who's had seniors to graduate in the spring and didn't want to send them off to a four-year school. And for some reason, that didn't happen with us. We were very, very hopeful. We were up in the summer, so that gave us some momentum that we felt like we were going to continue with. And that did not happen. We did see a slight decline in our fall enrollment. So we're kind of re-strategizing to figure out what happened and how we can improve that for spring. One of the things that we feel like happened there too is some of our students who had parents maybe that lost their jobs or were furloughed, and they had a part-time job, but they can pick up some more hours. So they've gone out to work and had to either cut back to part-time enrollment or withdraw temporarily until their parents can get back on their feet. So, and limited budgets, of course, everybody's facing that, at least in our system in North Carolina. So that's kind of what the challenges that Pitt Community College has been facing.
Thank you. And something you had mentioned kind of dovetails into our next question about those high school students. And although you were talking about the class of 2020, thinking about the class of 2021, whom have been out of school really since March for the most part. Due to the COVID pandemic, many students, both high school and college, feel disconnected from education. What are some ways that colleges can help students feel connected even from a distance? And how should colleges be handling the recruitment? I'm particularly interested in this question. I have a senior in high school this year, so hopefully you all can help. Dr. Black.
Okay, so not everything that comes with a crisis is bad. It creates disruption, right? Which can be good. It makes us rethink things, and maybe beyond this current crisis we're in, we take some of those learnings and continue them and maybe change things we've done in the past. So in my experience on the recruitment side, most community colleges are pretty traditional in their approach, meaning they're relying on outreach primarily to generate inquiries or leads. And obviously that whole game has changed, right? In some jurisdictions, high schools are not even open, or they're not allowing visitors in, and certainly not fairs with college and university representatives, right? So that changes the mix. And if two things, one, if community colleges don't figure out how to generate leads in other ways, they're going to have fewer applications, fewer admitted students, and fewer enrolled students. That's just a fact, right? So you got to look at different lead generation strategies. And I would suggest you start with your website, and one, driving traffic to that via search engine optimization and other means. But I would also suggest that once they get there, you make sure that you have a prominent call to action around requesting information. Now, you can call it whatever you want, but most schools call it request information. And that should lead directly to a form where you're capturing inquiry data and then using that data to cultivate interest of that student, whether it's in a CRM system or your student information system or something else, right? But capturing those inquiries. And I also would say that you need to capture inquiries from other sources that you may be missing now. So here's an example. Somebody calls your auto technician faculty member or a nursing faculty member, etc. They don't come through the admissions office or the marketing department. You never know about them. How are you capturing that information? Beyond a one-up response from that faculty member, what happens next? How are you cultivating the interest of that inquiry? You can't if you don't have them captured in some data system. People who send you test scores or send you their FAFSA information, right? Those are expressions of interest. So you want to capture those. Just working with a school right now that has a lot of their students new students come from referrals. They have a mechanism to capture the referrals on their website, and they push that out. They get those referrals from current students, from alumni, from industry leaders, from their own faculty and staff, right? So you got to get creative, get out of the box, think about different ways to generate inquiries. So that's number one. And number two, I'll try to be a little briefer with this response. Number two is, I'd say the schools I've worked with, the 2-year schools I've worked with, 80% of admissions staff time, the recruiters at least, is spent on outreach and other lead generation strategies, right? To me, that's a flawed model, because if you generate a lot of inquiries and then you don't cultivate them and then convert them and eventually enroll them, what's the point? You know, you're just creating a lot of inquiries that just drag you down and create a lot of work for everybody, versus having those recruiters work across the entire prospective student life cycle. They should be nurturing those prospects all the way through to enrollment and possibly beyond, but certainly through initial enrollment. And I think more schools need to think about this as a life cycle model, not just about getting leads to the front door.
More than just collecting names and information.
Yeah, yeah, that's
How
a
many,
part.
how many names can I collect?
Right.
Great, thank you. Toby?
This one of the, you know, like you said, not everything that comes out of this has been bad. And what we found is it prompted us to work more closely with the recruiting department, and to sort of button up some things and do a lot of the things that we've been talking about, is find, you know, where are all these interested folks coming from. And one of the things we found was that we create a lot of lists, both program inquiries and just all kinds of things. And once we kind of started looking around, we found that there were lots of them. And so we started working with those and working with both the recruiting people and you know, bringing those names and addresses and things into our marketing program and emails and things like that, because we didn't have money for, you know, mailers. So we relied on emails as much as we could. But so that was one good thing that came out of this. We've also we've created a lot of virtual information sessions that recruiting has done, and those have worked well. We did our virtual open house last week or the week before, and that worked very well. And it prompted us to do some things that we had been talking about as far as making videos highlighting various programs and divisions. Again, some positive has come out of this, and it has definitely made us think through that process a little bit more, like Dr. Black was saying. It is definitely a continuum, and you don't just plug in and then back out. That we're all part of it throughout, which is terrific. To go backwards a little bit more, something else that folks were talking about. Wake Tech has had a success story campaign for over a year now, probably 2 years. It's easy to lose track of time in the middle of all this, but we were able to use some of that we'd already done socially and stuff with these videos, particularly the ones that might have covered online students and things like that, because we found there's a lot of people that just aren't comfortable with online. Lucky for us, ours was very well developed and has received some awards and things like that. But there's a confidence level gap there that no matter how good your program is, people are a little weary of it, and some don't have the discipline perhaps to just get their work done every day or every week. They need that daily time that they sit down and do it. So, you know, working around those kinds of things, which is other stuff that recruiting and other things kind of help guide people through. So it was all throughout this, it's about creating, just encouraging people and giving them confidence that, yeah, things are weird and things are different, but you know, we've got some stuff in place, and we're all in this together, and we'll get you through. So that both the messaging and the marketing with safety and encouragement, and then throughout our recruiting process. So that's it for me.
Thank you so much. Suzanne?
If I could put Dr. Black's words on the screen in front of us and underline all of those pieces about capturing the information for people who have interest, but then really cultivating that group throughout the life cycle, I would want you to spend so much time focusing there. And we're having to rethink how we do that as well without our traditional travel, with the challenges that people have had getting SAT or ACT test dates, because that has been a significant source of names for us in the past. Depending on your institution's situation, you might be looking at the names that are not purchased from both ACT and the College Board. They make those available. But I will shift for a moment and tell you about some of the things that we put into place in March out of necessity, but that we're continuing. So we were able to quickly flip to virtual sessions, taking each one of our scheduled campus appointments with presentations and tours and making those virtual. And we're continuing daily to offer presentations. We're part of panels. We're developing material where we've had requests from high school counselors to say, give us a 10-minute video of somebody delivering the best parts of your presentation. Video has been key to this. It has affected open rates of email messages. Being able to produce video has had a wonderful impact for this. And it gave me one of the items on the wish list that I've had, a virtual tour. So that was the first piece that came out, the virtual tour. But now we also have a tour app. And we're seeing it's only been live for less than 3 weeks, and there is significant use of it. Certainly, our intention is for prospective students to be using this, but alumni and other guests who are coming to campus have access to it as well. And someone can take our standard tour that they would be led on by one of our Sterling's ambassadors, but they could also customize the tour according to their interest and the amount of time they have available. So we did reopen our campus visits in late August, early September. We put protocol into place that would limit the number of people visiting at any one time, how our staff members and our students interact with those guests while they're here, what they see while they're on campus. And we added Saturday visits every Saturday of the fall through November 14th, because we have more flexibility to go in academic buildings and to help them explore campus when classes aren't in session. The daily visit numbers actually are mirroring very closely with the numbers for the class who would have entered in 2020. So we have not seen resistance for people coming to campus. And in fact, the post-visit survey results have been very strong. And so I think part of it is that people aren't finding as many opportunities to visit campuses. So when they can go to a school, see that some health and safety precautions are being taken, but still be treated with as much warmth and hospitality as you can extend, that has been playing very well for us. So depending on your situation, if you haven't reopened those visits, maybe you have the opportunity to do so. Looking at how we've layered print in the mix, we think that is a more important part of reaching students at home. And the one thing before moving on to staying connected with current students that I would mention, and I was thinking about this as we were talking about other impacts of COVID, how people are reacting to imagery right now is really a fascinating study, because you may not have the resources, and we certainly don't have the funding to do all new photo shoots every year. So if you're using old photography resources, if you have old B-roll, and people, of course, pre-COVID were not wearing masks on campus, are you getting any pushback from people saying, wait a minute, how can you show people who aren't wearing masks? And then, of course, think of the other side of that. How does it limit your ability to perhaps communicate effectively when you do have part of your face covered by that mask? I was in San Antonio this past weekend, and a commercial for one of the private universities there caught my attention. It was newly shot, and every student speaking throughout the entirety of the commercial had a mask. They had to have paid special attention to sound quality. So that's just something to be aware of in social media, in other photography and videography that you're doing. But as I thought about your question, it's not just about staying connected to prospective students, but current students as well. And they can be some of the best voices for getting others to look at your institution. So what might be you be doing with faculty and peer check-ins with students? How might you put a renewed emphasis on advising? If it's just a single point in time each term, can that be extended in some way? Mental health services, we're offering online group work for students so that they can develop community and a sense of camaraderie as they go through the struggles associated with a very different academic and social environment. Spotlighting students in the e-newsletter, showing the things that they are still doing with their undergraduate research, with internships, job offers, etc. Online activities for student development. And I know we have a very traditional student body, and you're looking at a wide array perhaps of students who are there, but what are the types of activities or involvement that they've been in, and how can that still be extended to them online? Because I think each day they're constantly renewing, whether this is at a conscious level or not, their decision to remain enrolled in your institution. And so to reinforce all positive messaging that leads them to whatever their goals might be and keeps them connected to the institution can be of benefit.
Thank you. Jane.
Okay, I'm going to address current students first, and then I will address the prospective students, high school students. Our group right now, Student Activities and SGA, have done a really good job of trying to engage students through virtual meetings, whether it's an SGA meeting, whether it's a town hall where students submit questions and their concerns are addressed, things like that. Putting a face with a name when they can't be in front of individuals. Also, our student activities coordinator has created lots of fun game type student interaction through a virtual bingo game, virtual Kahoots game. We do Turn It Blue Tuesdays, and everybody wears their PCC blue on Tuesdays. And she's asking people to submit their photographs, and then the next week she posts them. To keep people engaged in campus activities when we can't be in the same space on our Fall Fest events or our Spring Fling events, where, you know, it's just a lot of fun. So I think engaging the students not only in the classroom, but also feeling still a part of Pitt Community College. I think on the faculty side, continuing to try to create engaging content online is critical for retaining those students for the next semester. You know, what kind of experience have they had so far? Are they going to want to continue that experience in the spring? For fall recruitment, we are, much like some of you, we've developed a virtual brochure that can be sent out electronically. Also, virtual tour is in the works right now, hosting virtual open houses for those prospective high school students, and utilizing you know, targeted social media advertising as well. In the past 3 years, I guess, we worked on developing an automated communication and messaging system called Recruit that our director of recruitment utilizes for keeping that message accurate for what stage of the funnel that prospective student is in, and making it automated so we don't have people wasting their time or you know, getting those old cards. I'm old school. The old cards that people would fill out at college fairs and submit that someone else would have to input into a database. that has become more streamlined. We still got some bugs to work out in it, but it is has definitely made it a little bit easier. So that's kind of what we have faced.
Thank you so much, and thank you for addressing the current students as well. Monique.
Just piggybacking off of what some of the other panelists have said, really being able to bridge the gap. As we've gone into this COVID period, some activities have returned to normal, some activities haven't, and really taking the time to map out the experience of a prospective student and say, okay, this is where they're actually coming on campus, but we want to follow up digitally, and then we want to make sure to connect them with another prospective student or an alumni, just making sure that you are intentional at every point, at every step, and giving alternative options for how prospective students want to engage with you in order to build a relationship. So they may want to speak with an admissions counselor, or they may want to do additional work on their own, and making sure that we're providing them with those options as part of their enrollment process is really critical to keeping someone engaged throughout the entire process, all the way through to enrollment. The other thing that I would also like to add on is content marketing. So also we have events, sometimes on campus, sometimes not, but continuing to have relevant speaker series and events leveraging your alumni and your community ambassadors, continuing to establish those relationships that you may already have in place, but that need to shift or alter in order to accommodate the environment that we're in is really important. And from a recruiting perspective, making sure that we can continue to create a more one-on-one type environment. And sometimes that's as simple as having a video chat instead of a telephone call, and different check-in points along the way to make sure that people are progressing in their enrollment, and just increasing opportunities for prospective students to communicate with the university is important. And lastly, I would say be out in the community. Like now there's more opportunities to volunteer within your within the community. Get out there, especially from a community college perspective. You have such a great opportunity to have visibility in the communities that you serve, and really have a presence beyond just asking for enrollment. And I think that goes a long way with showing people that you're not just a university, you're not just a college, you really are invested in what happens within that community with taking care of your students on and off campus. And I think that will go a long way as well.
Sabrina?
Yes.
Just a couple quick follow-ups to some of the things that have been said. There's been a lot of talk by the panelists about virtual tours, virtual sessions, et cetera. And that's a part of life these days, right? Later this week, I'm doing a recruiter sales training piece for a school in Canada, and it's partly around their virtual sessions. And here's the challenge that they face and you face, and that is, how do you make those things in a way that generate emotional appeal? And the reason for that is most students choose a school based on emotional factors more so than intellectual ones, right? It feels right. It feels good. I feel welcomed. I can see myself fitting in here. That's much, much harder to do in a virtual environment than it is in an in-person campus visit or presentation. Talking heads on a webinar are not going to get you there, right? So I would just challenge everybody to think about that. How do you create that emotional appeal? And the other last comment would be, when you're collecting that prospect data, make sure for your traditional age students, make sure you're capturing their parent data. And the reason for that, they've always been the most influential group of traditional age students, but that's been accelerated given the pandemic and the economic pressures from that, right? So at a very minimum, I want parent emails and potentially phone numbers. And I also want to ask permission to text, right? So don't forget that influencer group because they're very, very, very important.
Great. Yes, thank you. Okay, next question. Aside from COVID, what are other major challenges facing admission or marketing departments today, and how are you addressing those challenges? And we'll start with Toby.
Well, one of the things that we saw, and of course this is related to COVID, but we're having to deal with it, is we saw a large an increase in our applications and a drop in the conversion rate. And we think that's probably because everybody's life suddenly changed and they started weighing their options. And one of those was to come to Wake Tech. And so they filled out an application, and, you know, people around here have said they were just tire kicking, but, you know, those are folks that we have to deal with and plug into our system and see if we can convert them. So we've put a lot of effort into looking into how to increase our conversion rates. And we've talked a lot of the things we've already talked about engaging people more and, you know, increasing those touch points and all those other things, you know, staying connected throughout the process has all come from that. And again, we keep talking about things that we'll look back on and see them as positives, and that is one of them. So that's been one of the things that we've been doing. Another one is a realization that, and we've talked about this already as well, is a realization that there are just people out there, COVID or no COVID, that just aren't comfortable with online classes. And while they're ideal for some people just really don't like them, or they're afraid of them, or they don't think they'll get as good an education out of it in the end, or whatever. And there's that. And so to deal with that and address that has been another thing to tackle. So again, you know, all these things that are coming forth from this that we have to stop and address and figure out how to move forward with, they're things that we should have done anyway. It's sort of, you know, like the people who are, you know, I'm home days, so I'm going to paint the kitchen. These are the things that we have, you know, that we're in this situation, let's do them. And so we're able to address these non-COVID ongoing issues during this opportunity. So that's been a great one for us.
Thank you. And Suzanne?
As I thought about this question, I had reduced budgets at the top of my list, but of course we touched on that earlier. For us, it's been staffing continuity and options for training, the types of professional development where we actually might have put one or more members of our team together at a conference don't exist in the same way. And I think some people question the value and expense of simply flipping something that had been in person for years into an online environment. So how do we make sure that we're providing strong opportunities on campus and through external connections for our staff members? The national question for me of the value of higher education, with so many people wondering, is it worth the financial investment and the investment of time? And we see that magnified in a liberal arts environment. So thinking about your mix of academic programs, do some areas perhaps stand to be more challenged with that question of value than others? And tying that to that demonstration of ROI, return on investment, and that's come up. So what are the outcomes? And we have already had some data challenges. We certainly participate in the surveys that happen 6 months within graduation, but we're having to base the information that we share on the responses of those who actually take that moment to answer the questions, to be part of that survey. We want to expand that so that we have even more stories to tell, the data to back it up, but then those individual stories that speak to the piece Dr. Black had mentioned. the gap in high school learning outcomes and what the expectations are of our faculty when a student comes in. And I think we're seeing that exacerbated right now, because initially I pictured when many high schools went online last year that the students would still be doing their traditional class schedule. And I very quickly realized that that existed probably only in my head, and that when I think about the local school districts here, in many cases with issues of access, reliable access to internet, et cetera, students were receiving a packet and they had to complete certain assignments related to that packet and turn it in either at the end of the week or the beginning of next week. I saw somebody post something on social media about welcome back from the longest spring break ever. Well, if I read between the lines, that said a lot to me about what that person's children were perhaps not being challenged with in the classroom. So how do we work across this aisle between higher education and the K-12 environment to make sure that students are going to have the skill set they need to be successful coming in and they're not going to be discouraged? So that's more of a larger picture item, but I think it's important for us to consider. And do we have opportunities to put bridge programs or success programs into place? And then finally, just garnering attention in a very loud, crowded space. So think about how much information is being blasted at people through the internet, perhaps not as much through direct mail, but other sources. And we need to find ways for our institutions to emerge and tell a compelling story within that space. So there are many challenges, and hopefully we flip them today and moving forward and turn those into opportunities.
Thank you. Jane.
Okay. Our challenges, of course, like everybody else, the lack of face-to-face interactions has made the admissions process just super difficult. Advisors are scheduling Zoom or WebEx meetings with students to put that name with the face. We've got an information hotline that's manned at all times during business hours to get inquiries to the right person. We have publicized that phone number highly. And finally, new student orientations. We had a very strong new student orientation program for in-person. They received tons of great information. It was interactive, and that has fallen by the wayside and had to go virtual. Those sessions were also mandatory before a student could register for classes. So they had to attend. We did have a virtual option for students who were out of state or online students only, but it still had the same information. It did not have the same interaction that you would get in person. But that mandatory requirement since COVID has been dropped. So they don't have to attend. It's still there and encouraged for them to participate, but it's not required. And I think we're going to see a lot of students that aren't as successful as if they had participated. So that's a downside.
Yes, absolutely. Dealing with those same challenges. Monique?
I'm going to just pick the ones that haven't already been discussed. I'm going to say fluctuating and rising costs of advertising for the schools that are leveraging media, like paid media. Just it's not as effective all the time as it used to be. So for us, it's really keeping an eye on efficiency of your marketing channels and adjusting as necessary, and really just optimizing, keeping a really clear view of what your audience is looking for at any given time, because those things do change. We saw a lot of COVID shift changes, but it still changes over time even without COVID, right? So making sure that you really have an understanding of what your prospective students are looking for, and that you're finding the best messaging that resonates, and when you don't have the best messaging, that you're cutting that immediately and moving on to the next thing. And I would also say resource constraints. Teams are not always the same size as they used to be, and just really being able to prioritize the work that's going to be most effective.
Thank you. And Dr. Black.
Sure. I'll share two things very quickly here. One is COVID itself and the distraction it's creating on the workforce at your institution, right? Faculty and staff. Just was on a conference call yesterday with a community college in the Midwest, 5-person financial aid office. 4 of the staff, 5 staff members either have COVID or are just coming off of it. That decimates your whole financial aid operation. They've had a couple of cases in their admissions office. And even just dealing with the things that come out of this campus-wide, you know, whether it's PR messaging or whatever it might be, as a distraction for the marketing department. So the only solution to that, other than getting rid of COVID, which we'd all like, is strategic dexterity, right? Prioritizing things that matter the most and letting go of some other things. We don't like to let go of things, right? It's not in our nature. But sometimes in the kind of situation we're in now, you have to, and it's healthy to sometimes say no. We can't do it. The other thing, the second thing builds on what Suzanne and Toby referenced earlier, and that's your program array. Your program array tends to be very different than a 4-year institution, whether it's public or private, meaning you have a lot more technical, hands-on type programs. And those don't play as well online in instructional delivery, right? So to Suzanne's point about return on investment, how do you make those more technical programs still seem to be valid? Again, that school in the Midwest I was working with yesterday, they have a power line program. Well, how do you do that remotely? You know, it's a mystery to me. So, but somehow you got to figure out what, particularly for those technical programs, what is the current and maybe near-term future value proposition for each one of those programs? Value proposition meaning what, in this current state, what is that program going to do for me? How is it going to prepare me for what's ahead? That's the ultimate question that your educational consumers are considering.
Thank you. Sorry, I was just writing all this down as quickly as I could. All right. So I do have a couple of questions in the chat that I just wanted to quickly ask. Are any of the school panelists using TikTok as a way to market? Jane says no. Toby says no. Okay. Capella, no. All right.
We talk about it a lot, but we haven't really pulled the trigger on it yet.
And I asked that question was mine. And the reason I asked is because I see a lot of young people on social media. And right now, TikTok is the big thing for that college going age group. And I know we talked about touching them personally and marketing emotionally. What I've seen, even with my teenage kids, is they get an emotional response using things like TikTok, whereas Instagram and Facebook doesn't do it for them anymore.
Yeah, Cape Fear is using TikTok, according to Sonia Johnson. I guess from my perspective, with students, having 3 teenagers myself, do students use with these, you know, they don't really, they say Facebook is kind of for the parents, right? But when we encroach in on those platforms that students seem to like at the time, whatever that flavor of the week is, do students pay attention to the college networks, do you think? Or are they more focused on their friends, or is it a turnoff for them maybe? But now the adults in my school are here.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I don't know. Just thought about that when we were talking about it. Cape Fear says they've been happily surprised and they've had several posts with over 1 million hits. Okay.
So use
And
TikTok.
then do what?
So use TikTok. That's the lesson from that.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so Joanne from Cape Fear says our marketing team has done a great job with TikTok. Most of their videos feature students and not us talking to them. So that probably makes the difference, Joanne. You're right.
Whenever you can get the students to deliver these messages for you, that's a home run. It has so much more
Yes.
credibility than just a bunch of old people barking at you.
I know, you realize how not cool you are when you're in these roles, right?
My daughter makes sure I know that very well.
Yes, my sons do too. And then another question is, did everyone keep orientation and advising mandatory? So Wake Tech, yes. I assume it's virtual or?
Yeah, it is.
Our
Okay.
advising is mandatory, but the orientations, as I mentioned before, are not.
Okay.
We were lucky we had a virtual orientation all along, so we didn't have to retool anything. It was already there, thankfully.
That's great. Yes. Okay. And then what types of stories are you telling? And Suzanne answered this one in the chat. She says that they're sharing stories of community service experiences, internships, research experiences, student-led voter registration, and alumni success. Is anyone doing anything different or have anything specific they'd like to share?
That's pretty much what we've been doing. Just the general kind of, personal interest type stuff that kind of gives the place a nice face and other than just a big old brick building on Highway 401. So.
Right. Okay.
Sabrina,
Yes.
just to add one thing, and that is there, in my mind, two different kinds of success stories. Those that are just kind of generic, they're about the experience at the college. But the other kind is what I would call proof points, meaning here's your marketing platform, here's your key messages. What are the stories that you have that support, validate those claims in those key marketing messages? In other words, you work to align the stories with who you're saying you are. If we're a small, caring college, your story should reflect that.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
If we're a college that really is about access and student success, your stories should reflect that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all I'm saying is at least a number of these need to align with those marketing platform messages.
Can I add to that
I
for a
agree.
second?
And that's why I asked that question also, is because when you see commercials like Phoenix, where one in particular, where the little boy is talking about his mom and she's a dragon who takes care of everyone else. And she never takes care of herself. And finally, she decides to take care of herself and she can through that institution. That tells a story, but it's a generic story. It's not about a particular person, but it creates an emotional message to those who are looking at that story. And that's why I asked that. So should colleges tell general emotional stories, or should they talk about specific students and successes of those students? Which one has more of an impact to the general public?
I don't know how.
Sorry, go ahead.
I don't know how others on the panel feel, but my feeling about this is that it should be both, mixture, right? That you blend the two.
I agree. I think, at our school, we try to use our actual students in our marketing. We will occasionally do stock photography, but for the most part, we use our faces in our stories. We've got a media relations director that is also an excellent photographer, so he gets us great photos that we can use. And I think it's good for our community to recognize people in our advertising and know that that could be me. If he can do that, I can do that. That's what we feel like our stories need to what the end result of our stories needs to be.
We
I would
built,
say too, I mean, marketing is, it's part science, but it's part art, right? So like you have to be able to help the organization identify what the right message is at the right time for each student. So it's not going to be the same at every individual school, like what resonates. And you have to get out there and you've got to test new things and see what works in your space.
Toby?
yeah, we started our story campaign, somewhere between a year and 2 years ago, and we actually have built a database. We had the information on these students. We asked for folks to recommend people who had a good story, and we entered them into a database with their name, their contact information, what programs they took, demographic information, and then just a synopsis of what their story was. And so we could actually go and target these messages according to all kinds of different things. If we needed to promote plumbing, let's say, do we have a story about somebody doing that was in the plumbing program? And if we could do that, we could choose demographic stuff according to what our SEM committee might want to pay attention to at the time. So that was a great resource for us. It just made it very easy to hit all kinds of things, to target as much as you can, but actually do it in a way with something that's nice and organic and personal. So
and different channels lend better to targeted messages, right? Like if you're going to build an ad campaign and you're going to put it everywhere, you've got to use the message that's going to resonate with the most number of people. You're not going to want to really laser in on one specific program if that's not what everyone who's coming to your school is. So you take kind of a really broad view on that kind of thing. But when you're looking at email or you're looking at something that's going to go directly to one person, you can really narrow down that message a little bit more. You can serve them an alumni message that really relates to whatever key topic that they've identified that they're interested in, whether that be a collegiate program or it could be a quality of a university, and you can serve that message directly to that person using that medium. So that's why those messages are often different at different points in the marketing funnel.
Wonderful, thank you. And panelists, I know that we've kind of gone off the script here, and we will not be able to make it to all of our questions that we had, which is, I think, a good problem to have in a sense, because we've gotten a lot of really good information today. And I do want to be able to open it up to the audience out there to see if there are any additional questions they have. And, depending on if everyone's available or willing, we may be able to do a follow-up session to address our other marketing questions that we do have. But I did want to open it up to the group. If there are any questions, please put those in the chat if you have any questions, and we will be happy to ask. But in the meantime, while we're waiting to see if we have any questions, I do want to close with the question, how can the colleges and the system office, so the North Carolina Community Colleges in conjunction with the system office, work collaboratively to improve the marketing efforts for the 58 colleges? And I'll start with Dr. Black.
Well, that's a good question. To me, there are some things. Well, let me give you an example. You all share a common student information system, colleague, right? There are things that can be done in a standardized way across the 58 colleges, and some things that can't, right? I think the marketing part that can be somewhat standardized is sort of what we were just talking about. Is there a set of generic messaging, stories, etc., that would be common, not the exact story, but similar genre of stories that would be common across the community colleges, could be promoted for all 58 community colleges at the same time by the district or in conjunction with the district, basically the district paying for it. And that would alleviate some pressure from those of you on the campus levels. The other thing that could be done is working with the data you have to analyze performance of marketing efforts, right? So a lot of you, for example, are doing email campaigns. A lot of you are doing postcards, etc. How effective are those? I don't need to do a study at all 58 schools to figure that out, right? The answer is going to be probably the same, or at least similar enough for each school, because you're similar in terms of your nature, your type of institution, and the type of students you tend to attract, that you're going to get a similar kind of response. We were just talking about social media, right? I've seen a ton of social media studies that suggest that those are not effective recruitment tools. Now, are they effective for building awareness, building a bit of reputation or image of the institution? Yes, but do those engaged people that you have in social media, do they translate to inquiries, applicants, and enrolled students, right? That's the kind of stuff that might could be tracked at a system level, so that you all have a snapshot of what's working, what's not, and then on the ground where you are, you can adjust in pretty much in real time, particularly if that kind of information were in a real-time dashboard that could be, you could look at the aggregate, and then you could drill down to your own college and see the data.
Thank you so much. And Jane, particularly being part of this North Carolina Community College system, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, I think that our system does a great job with the system-wide marketing campaign that was prepared a year or so ago with the higher education, HIRE, and that's the type of unity that I think we can all benefit from right now, is community college systems as a whole, rather than competing with it individually, knowing that our community is the one that's going to be attending our college for the most part. So I'm not competing with Sonia at Cape Fear. I'm not going to get her students here. So I'd like to see those kinds of campaigns continue for us to be able to use.
Great, and perhaps even more consistency among how colleges are using those, and even using them in general, right? I don't know how many colleges have really been pushing that. Toby, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well from Wake Tech.
Well, I think events like this are a great thing. You know, while some of us our sizes are different, and exactly where we are in this state is different, and of course our state varies a lot from one side to the next, we all face the same challenges. You know, human nature doesn't change no matter where you are, so we've got to deal with these folks the same way, and what's working and what's not, just compare notes is always a great thing. I was in a meeting the other day with some folks from Bio Network, and the idea of marketing all of us by subject matter is a very interesting idea. And with that, the courses are listed, and you can click on it and it'll tell you what schools offer them. And I thought that was sort of an interesting way of maybe getting the word out there, is more by subject matter. Of course, if people are interested in something and they're searching it, then that's just another way of finding it. I thought that was very interesting, and something that maybe it would, it's an obvious fit for Bio Network, while maybe it was something that we could look at for other subjects as well.
And Suzanne?
Well, I recognize that I am not in your system, so it's very interesting to hear those who are talk about this. I was thinking about the analogy of a single institution with many academic units. And in some cases, that central marketing office, as they look to protect the brand imagery and make sure that there is consistency, they will provide templates so that those individual areas can create some of their own material while staying within the brand standards. So that probably goes in line with some of that common messaging across the 58 institutions and the value of pursuing this type of education in North Carolina. But what might the central office be able to do in order to provide the framework of collateral so that institutions can put in their specific people, instead of using stock photography, their people, their stories, etc., but there's some continuity across that. In order to make sure that messaging is appropriate, I always think about data. And so if every school is using Colleague, does each school have the same level of training and comfort right now with Colleague to understand data collection and data management, and then how to use any communication tools that might exist within Colleague? So could there be training opportunities provided through the system level for the individual institutions to even think about how do you segment your audience using that tool? Is it by academic interest, or maybe full or part-time study, traditional or post-traditional, somebody who's there for retraining or a career transition? You're going to know your institution and your student types, but that will affect how you are targeting your messaging. And then perhaps the other piece of data that could be considered at the system level is access and distribution of external data. So if you don't have in-depth information about how your own students are consuming media and how they want information to be delivered, what might you be able to garner through the Pew Research Center or other external organizations that provide national level data? And I don't know about access to the National Student Clearinghouse, but where are your non-enrolling students going? Students who are leaving your institutions, are they simply stopping out, dropping out? Are they looking at persistence to degree, and how many are continuing on to a bachelor's or other advanced degree? So maybe there are opportunities to harness resources at the system level in order to share that information across your individual institutions.
Great, thank you so much. I really want to thank the panelists first and foremost for taking time out to share all of your expertise with us. This has been wonderful. I personally have taken 2 pages of notes. So, you know, this has just been extremely helpful and great information. I also want to thank Dr. Harris at Wake Tech, Dr. Golston at Halifax, Dr. Braswell at Pitt, Dr. Hickman and Dr. Kelly at the system office for assisting with the content of this session and for identifying panelists for the system for this conference. And I hope that we are able to continue this conversation outside of this webinar. And Dr. Hickman, would you like to say anything?
I just want to echo what you said. Thanks to everyone who had a hand in planning this. And thanks to our panelists. You did a wonderful job. Lots of great information. Ms. Terry took a lot of notes. I took some notes, and I think everyone else did also. But for the general public, just make sure that you send me anything that you think you want to hear at the next sessions. We're going to continue to have multiple sessions throughout the year surrounding enrollment management. And so just send something to me. If you think you have any changes that we can implement from this session, just let us know. We're very open to new ideas, and we're not sensitive at all. So just let us know how to make this better. Our goal is to make sure that you have everything you need to make sure your roles are successful. So again, thanks everyone for attending this session. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. Get some rest. I know many people were up last night looking at the election. So get some rest, and thank you.
Thank you so much.
Y'all take care.
Take care, y'all.
Thank you.